Welcome to this edition of Inside Silver Bay. My name is Bruce Tamlyn, and I recently retired as the chaplain at Silver Bay. And I'm grateful that I've been asked to offer these programs for the wider Silver Bay community. The title of all of the programs that we're doing in 2023 is Making the Most of This Precious Life. And again, the idea to try to introduce some ideas and concepts that will really support us in just maximizing this gift of life that we've been given. It is such a gift, and that the idea that we can make the most of this gift in our capacity to love and forgive and know joy and know a sense of inner contentment and peace within us, which I think is what the spiritual life calls us to. So that's the overall theme, and we've been working through a number of different topics, and I'm most grateful to be in this library at the Brookside Community House, where we have our pastoral respite ministry going on, and with me is Austin Porth, our media digital specialist from Silver Bay. Thank you, Austin, for taping this and making this available. So again, we've been working through a number of different topics around this major theme, and the group of topics we're working with right now is under the concept of called inner work, doing our inner work that allows us to deepen in our spiritual journey that way. And the topic that we're going to work on today is the topic of shadow and dealing with our shadow side. But before we get into that, I'd like us to just do a brief centering exercise here. And I would invite you to find a comfortable chair where you are, and just to sit comfortably in the chair and to feel the support of the floor, supporting your feet, and the support of the chair, holding your body and allowing yourself just to rest and relax into the chair. And then what we're going to do is just do a short, simple breathing exercise together, where I would invite us to begin by just breathing gently, and as we're breathing, just feeling any tension that we might be holding in our body. And we would start with our feet, and then as we move from our feet up into our calf muscles and our knees and our thighs, just to let go of any tension that might be there. Let me suggest that you would close your eyes, and in your mind's eye, picture these parts of your body and just begin to be in touch with them to see if you're holding tension there. And if so, just breathe into that place and let that tension go. And then as we move further up our body into our chest area, and our shoulders and our arms, again, just relaxing and letting tension go that we might be holding. And then we move up into our shoulders and our neck and our head area, and just relaxing and letting whatever tension we might be holding, letting that tension go. And then we're just going to do this very simple breathing exercise where we breathe in through our nose, inhale, and then we're going to exhale through our nose. And as we breathe out, exhale, we're just going to, in our mind's eye, say this word that brings a sense of peace and calm to us. It might be the word joy, or it could be the word peace, or the word love, or the word God, whatever works for you, that brings an image of a real calm and centering place. And so just for a couple minutes, we'll do this together, where we inhale through our nose, breathe in. And as we exhale, just to say the word that we've chosen as a centering word. And again, to breathe in. Breathe out. And in saying our word. And just to do this a couple times. I hope you can feel the gentleness and the calming of this exercise. And I know we're not able to do this for too long, but you might be able to try this for maybe 10 minutes or 12, 15 minutes a day as just a centering experience, whether you think of it as centering prayer or meditation, just to feel the presence of the divine and to ground ourselves in the day. So thank you for doing this together. And so our topic today in this idea of doing inner work is really a key topic for us. And we will spend other times, other programs on just this very topic called the shadow, our shadow side. And I want to refer to a couple of resources, but one book that I've taken a lot of this information out of is called Owning Your Own Shadow by Robert Johnson. Owning Your Own Shadow by Robert Johnson. And there are many other books about shadow out there that you can read and come to understand. But let me just comment initially here that shadow is not something we talk about a lot in our culture, our shadow sides. It's hard to talk about at times. It can be embarrassing to talk about, or we're not very proud of it, or we don't want to really be in touch with it that way, because it's this sort of darker side to our personalities, to who we are. And I can just describe it briefly for us here. This topic of shadow, it focuses on our sort of unethical nature, our tendencies to do things that are not our best or in our best interest, or often in the best interest of those around us. Many people call this shadow. Shadow work really comes out of the work that was done by Carl Jung and analytic psychology in terms of looking at the shadow. And one of the major themes, if you were working with an analytic therapist or psychologist, would be the theme of integrating our shadow. The idea that our shadow is part of us, that we all have a shadow piece. We'll talk about that in a minute, but the idea not to split it off or not to try to dismiss it, but to actually try to integrate it that way, try to integrate our shadow into our personality so we come to understand it, so we're able to avoid some of the things that it might bring up for us that way. So an example would be a pastor on Sunday morning, takes the offering and puts it down in the back, and then when everybody leaves, goes to count the money, whatever, and feels like the church isn't paying him enough, and so he slips $50 into his pocket that way, actually, stealing from the church, kind of a shadow moment, and he's justifying it himself because he feels the church isn't paying that much. And so the idea would be, if he wanted to work this through, to meet with somebody who can help him understand and not judge him around it or not condemn or that, but just to say, so what's the feeling behind this? Well, they're not paying me enough. And so, but to be able to talk about this shadow side and to be able to kind of come clean with it, and then maybe pay back the church whatever he had taken over a period of time. So this idea of shadow is something that it's kind of around our brokenness. Others call it this part of ourselves that might include sort of a sinful nature about who we are that way. What we're talking about here again is not our best selves that way. And from here on, we'll use the word shadow to describe what we're talking about today. So let me again try to describe and understand what is our shadow and how do we define it. Our shadow side refers to our inner urges, our compulsions, our motivations, our dysfunctions that drive us towards unethical behavior that we really don't want to talk about, behavior that we really don't want to own, behavior that we're not really proud of at all that way. And the shadow is that side of our personality that contains all these parts that we don't want to admit having. We're mostly unaware of our shadow. A lot of it is in the unconscious mind. The shadow is part of ourselves that we perceive as this darker, weaker part of ourselves, and therefore needs to be hidden and denied. Again, the term shadow was made popular by Swiss psychologist Carl Jung. He saw it as the uncivilized, even primitive side of human nature. He believed that we needed to fully see and own and understand our shadow side if we're to be fully human, fully integrated persons. And while a person's shadow might contain such classic elements as sadness or anger or laziness or cruelty, it might also hide our personal sense of healthy power, our independence, our emotional sensitivity, and our capacity to love. Again, the book that I referred to earlier by Robert Johnson, Owning Your Own Shadow, describes the shadow as, and I quote, that dumping ground for all those characteristics of our personality that we disown. A question then we might ask, do I have a shadow? Yes, we all have a shadow. Nobody's exempt from having a shadow. The question is, how do we treat this important aspect of ourselves? And I will shortly address that important question. Another common question is, were we born with a shadow side? Again, let me turn to Robert Johnson, who said this, we are all born whole, meaning without a shadow, and let us hope that we will all die whole. But in between birth and death, we have a shadow side that we are called to deal with. I think that's a great understanding of that we're not born with a shadow, but we'll end up having a shadow part to our personality, and the idea we're called to deal with it in our life. The shadow making process begins early in our life. Life circumstances happens, family wounds, painful experiences, things get a little off. We begin to separate things into sort of good and evil, or good and not good that way. And this is how our shadow begins to make progress in our life. We begin to divide our lives. We begin to separate unacceptable characteristics, the parts of ourselves that we don't want to look at. But these parts that we try to not look at are unacceptable. They don't go away. They begin to collect in the dark corners of our personality. When they have been hidden for so long, over a long period of time, they take on a life of their own, and our shadow life emerges. And when these shadow elements accumulate more energy than our ego, they can emerge as sort of secret behaviors or attitudes or beliefs or actions that can be very hurtful to ourselves and others. As Johnson says in his book, the shadow gone autonomous is a terrible monster in our psychic house. These behaviors, attitudes, beliefs, actions begin to show again as addictions, compulsions, anger, rage, impatience, and a variety of other self-diminishing practices. Alcohol, pornography, overeating, inappropriate sexual behavior, stealing, abusing, overly controlling of others, lying, fits of anger or rage. This is to name a few of where we can have this shadow aspect to ourselves. And I want to just say something here as I read off that list and something showed up for you, be gentle with yourself. This is not about judging ourselves or criticizing ourselves that way. This is about owning, looking at it and being able to talk about it and make it more, shining a light on it so we can actually begin to deal with it, that we're finding somebody to talk to about it. So again, don't be hard on yourself around this shadow work. We have to be gentle with ourselves and know that we all have shadow aspects to ourselves. The key is to talk to somebody that's trained and can help you with your shadow work, and then integrate that shadow and come to understand it so it doesn't have as much power that way. Again, we tend to talk about when we shine a light on a shadow part to us, it begins to clear up. An example of this is we might be attracted to somebody other than our spouse, and we start to have a relationship with them, or we start to have a very secret relationship with them, and we start to sort of stray a bit in our behavior, and it's a secret that's going on inside of ourselves, and it might be a secret for that other person. But the idea is, as soon as we find somebody to talk to about it, it loses its power. It doesn't have that grip on us that it had before, because we start to talk about it and own it. So again, be gentle with yourself around this as we talk about shadow. It's not an easy topic to talk about, or not an easy topic for us to deal with. We begin by knowing, in terms of dealing with our shadow, that we can rid ourselves of our shadow side. The idea that those that attempt this are often in denial of their shadow at the beginning, but eventually will suffer some consequences that will encourage them to begin to deal with their shadow and talk about it. And actually, the shadow is a very important and useful part of us. Our shadow is something that can indeed offer profound insight and a deep understanding of our behavior, and a clear pathway to living a life of wholeness, joy, and inner contentment. The key question for us is, do we have the courage and the willingness and the fortitude and the ego strength and the vulnerability to make our shadow more conscious, to have it be more present to us that way? Carl Jung once said, the amount of growth we will experience in our life is proportionate to the amount of truth we can stand about ourselves. So continually to become more aware of our shadow is a great opportunity for us to live a deeper and more grounded life. The axiom here is that as we become more aware of our shadow, we turn to become more whole and happier and healthier and more content men and women. There is a short verse in the Bible. It's in James chapter 4, verse 1 and 2. James so insightfully tells us in this passage that what we have a tendency to do is to project our shadow, our unconscious parts of us that we can't accept and that we've suppressed. We project that on others. In other words, when we repress and deny things about ourselves, James calls these things the desires that battle within you. Do they not go away or disappear? Rather, they grow in power and create real difficulties for us. Our repressed shadow side will emerge in what is known as psychological projection. The psychological projection is when we attribute an unconscious thought or feeling about our own self onto another. And so an example of this is when men project their unresolved anger issues onto women. The emotionally and physically abused women men do, because they haven't resolved some of their own anger issues and rage issues that are within them, that maybe came from their own past or their own relationship with their mother or their own relationship. Women do the same thing, but it's more common for men. Research shows that we tend to more commonly project our unresolved issues on people who are closest to us. Hence, the all-common issue of, again, husbands may be abusing their wives, and in ways that are subtle or in ways that are more hurtful. It's also important to note here that Carl Jung also believed that the concept of this, called the collective shadow, is where people unite their shadows in groups and societies. So a collective shadow is a whole group of people would project onto a different group of people something that they have been unable to resolve within themselves. Jung saw this as a very great danger to civilization, and two examples are really clear here. the Ku Klux Klan in projecting their collective shadow onto people of color. And the second example is Nazis projecting their collective shadow onto people of Jewish heritage. So what do we do about our shadow sides? Let me bring this to closure. Anne Dillard, in her writing, says that we must go in and down and meet the violence, the wound, the fear, the terror that we have within ourselves that we project onto others. Dillard is talking about this tendency to make enemies by projecting what we dislike within ourselves onto somebody else, because we resist going down to meet this enemy that's within us. Here Dillard is reflecting what the prophet James clearly wrote about when he said the desires battle within you. Abraham Lincoln said this about shadow. It's a quote from Abraham Lincoln, all human beings have their weaknesses, but not all of us realize them, come to grips with them, or offset their negative impact. As a group of those of of a primary endeavor is interacting with other people, and leaders must accomplish the paradoxical task of managing their darker sides. This is what Lincoln said, and this is way before Jung even named it that way. For Jung, the self-realization, becoming whole, meant this integration of shadow again. How do we do this? We do this through a relationship. We often can't do this inner work around shadow work alone. So the idea of creating a relationship, somebody you feel safe to talk to, that you can open up and begin to deal with some of your own shadow parts. I've had to do this in my life, and I just suggest that we all have opportunities to do this. And so we might find a therapist or a counselor or a spiritual director or somebody that we can begin to open up with about our shadow parts that way. So the idea that shadow is an important dimension of doing inner work, we're going to revisit from time to time. But I would just encourage us to understand that this whole idea of shadow is an important dimension of how we live our life, and our ability to understand our shadow helps us to deepen in the capacity to do inner work. So let me close on a positive note. If we allow ourselves to enter into our shadow sides just gently, and being gentle with ourselves, we come to an extraordinary moment in our life. We will come to understand that our shadow is a pathway to true freedom and the abundant life. Our shadow shows us our woundedness, our failings, and in a very clear and direct way. Inner shadow work gets us in touch with our anger, our fear, our compulsions, our greed, and our inability to fully love another. So shadow work offers us the gift of a lifetime, a gift to heal, to become more whole, the gift of learning to truly love, to love ourselves, to love others, and to allow others to love us. This is what is possible. And this is possible because we have the courage to know that the ability to look inside of us is something that I think our faith encourages us to do. It's part of doing our inner work. Again, I close by saying, be gentle with yourself around this. This is not easy sort of to deal with and come to understand. I would just suggest that if you have any interest in this, that you would find somebody you trust and somebody who's trained to talk about shadow work. Again, know that within our shadow, doing this inner work is the possibility to come to a more joyful and abundant life. So thank you for tuning in today. You're welcome to contact me, Bruce Tamlyn @silverbay.org. I wish you well. Take care. Bye now.